Museum with? It's a good question.
And we're live.
All right, I will call the study session to order, and we can get to work on our fee schedule. This will be presented by our finance director, Bonnie Dennis.
Good evening. I'm actually going to turn it over to Keith McClung. He's the assistant finance director. He's done a lot of work and worked with the departments on the fee schedule. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, Bonnie. Good evening, everyone. If I could direct your attention to the packet for this evening. I'm primarily working out of the master fee schedule review PDF. And just overall, there's quite a few changes. Not only do we have some design changes, but also we're presenting a 2-year fee schedule. And so there's quite a bit of difference in terms of presentation, but we had to add a second year, and it has proven to be challenging in terms of presentation. So bear with me on any sort of edits that might need to be needed in terms of presentation. But if I could direct you to SS7. This is our administration section, and I just want to highlight that it's the same from last year in terms of methodology and how we come up with the rates. We use these rates primarily for public records requests. So depending on the where the effort lies in getting the public request, that's how we determine. Moving on to SS8, you'll see we have the building department, and all of these fees have increased year over year, as well as into 22. In order to kind of see all of these changes amongst the sections, we also have attachments at the end of this document. So if I could... Can everyone hear me still okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm actually on, if I could direct your attention to page SS43. This is going to present the same information in the tables in terms of in the fee schedule. So this is just kind of a snapshot of all of the changes. Since there are so many more numbers to present, I've highlighted in blue the changes year over year. Sam in building can speak more to the changes, but overall they increased based on a 2.4 to 2.9% range. Sam, if you'd like to take over.
Actually, before we do that, can I just give a little bit of a perspective of the reason why we went to a 2-year fee schedule? In the past, we've always done a 1-year fee schedule, but then in order to get our biennium budget, we do the 2-year budget, so it just made more sense to do a 2-year fee schedule so that it aligns with the budget cycle. This also helps with revenue projections for the years. So that is why we went to a 2-year fee schedule. So there is some areas where we can make amendments in the fee schedule as we go through. So for example, if there's code changes and those went to council, those will get updated in the fee schedule. But generally, all the fees that are presented to you tonight is what we are anticipating for the fees to be for those 2 years. There are other areas where we do record pass-through fees in the fee schedule, and those will be updated as we get those fees from the other jurisdictions. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about why we did the 2-year fee schedule versus the year.
And can you speak to an issue that goes through a lot of the increases, which is CPI, they're pegged to the CPI. Isn't it possible that the CPI doesn't go up next year?
It is possible, but we actually do an average. And I know that when we get through, Sam is probably the best one to probably explain that a little bit better because she uses CPI through the building and Steve as well through the some of the other fees. So, but it is possible, but we actually use an average, and that incremental is minor overall. It's immaterial.
If I might add, from my point, I use the CPI and I use a 5-year running average. So it may adjust a little bit next year, but it won't be much because the 5-year takes out the highs and the lows of the changes.
And if I would add one other thing too on the SAFE and SSMP fees, we used a 3-year construction cost index out of Seattle. So
I noticed the 3-year and 5-year in the narrative, and I was curious. So it's the last 5 years. It's not, it's the average over the last 5 years or the last 3 years. Okay.
Yes, correct for me.
Correct for me also. It actually ended up being 2.9 was the average, and I used 2.5 just to keep it, just in case we had a little bit of a decrease. And it was an easier number to run with as we're going through each year. So my fees all went up by the 2.5-ish. They have to run in a chart, which makes them off a little bit, but the 2.5 was where I tried to stay in that when I did all of my fee increases. So mine is, it's the same every year. We, in talking with my builders, it's easier for them to adjust for a little bit every year rather than 20% all at one time, which is what I had to do like 5 years ago when I first started. So we have just incrementally done those fees to try to offset that cost to them. So mine are all status quo. I think they were just the 2.5 this year and then 2.5 next year. Before it was just specifically on the CPI, but because I wouldn't know what the CPI would be for next year, then I did the average of the last 5 years and came up with the 2.5.
And did the staff report say these had to be run by the state, yours?
Mine do. Mine has to go through the state anytime I change them. If we don't, I had to do it this year because we changed the verbiage of how I was increasing that. If we don't do anything, if we don't change any of them other than by this 2.5, then I don't have to notice it every 2 years. I just only have to notice it when they change different from what I have this year. Does that make sense?
Sure. If you're raising by a formula and you've told them your formula, you don't have to get for future approval. It's if we add something new or whatever, make a more dramatic change.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions for me?
For me.
So if there's no other questions, do we want to move on to the next section, which I think is, I don't know.
Yeah, it's business register or finance and parking. And so if I could direct everyone's attention to SS 48. So there are two fees that we changed in business registration. These go up annually. This year, just due to rounding and ease, we decided to just make it an even 140 and round up to 145 for FY22. The only other change was how much we charge on the half-time or kind of the businesses that aren't commencing a full year. So we raised that $2. So all of these increases with rounding are single digit in the 3 to 4% range.
Which is based off that CPI.
Correct. The other changes on this page, you'll see to parking permit fees. We raised the monthly and quarterly fees in both years, FY21 and 22.
And those went up by the $10 per month. That was based off of the previous council direction. And then the quarterly just goes along the same rate with that.
Correct.
Is there a reason that we held steady on the fee for each FTE, which to my mind was always the more relevant part of the way we charge on the business registration?
Yes, we kept that fee flat.
I see that. Was there a reasoning behind that?
Actually, if you look at the calculation, it's only a 3% increase. So it actually is so small that even with rounding, you still get $70. So it was like $70, sorry, not $70, $10. So because it's so small, there's really not an increase to an FTE count versus the 140 when you do the calculation.
Yeah, I guess, going back, trying to think who was even here. No one. I'm looking at a screen. I don't think anybody was even here when we had this conversation. All right, so going back about 4 years, we had briefly toyed with the concept of an actual business income tax because we were looking at our budgets going out 3 and 4 and 5 years and seeing us going into the red. And it was the one place we didn't have any kind of actually, Bonnie, you were here for that conversation.
Well, and I don't know if I was on council yet, but I definitely watched that conversation.
Yeah. And so we ended up not doing that at that time, which I disagreed with that decision. But what we did talk about doing was increasing the per employee charge faster than the base fee, with the idea being that the bigger employers could
Well, and I think
put more into the city's, the running of the city than they were currently doing. Go ahead.
Well, and I think we did there was the first question before I was on council about going to a business tax, trying to assess the business's actual incomes and taxing on that, which was not adopted. But I think since I've been on council, we have had some conversations with Bonnie about trying to have a tiered kind of thing with exemption for small businesses, but a higher per employee price on bigger businesses, right?
And I think that just the per employee price does that. I mean, if you're a coffee shop and you have 4 employees and we raise it from $10 to $12, you're paying another $8 a year, another $8 a year. If you're Precision, you're paying another, several hundred. It has the same tiered effect just by doing it. That was why we were talking about raising the employee fee rather than the base fee.
I I do recall that. I do remember that we did talk about a tiered approach. To do that, it does take a code amendment. The way our fees are structured in the code, it would require us to go back to the code and make some changes to the code. We can increase the fee if that's the decision tonight, but the actual changing it to a tiered system or the research on the business tax piece would require us going back to the code.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty tone deaf at this point in history to create a business tax. But I don't necessarily think a $1 or $2 per employee increase would be particularly tone deaf. I think the small employers, it's not noticeable, and the large employer, it's not noticeable for them either, frankly. But
just want to point out that almost anything you do that adds burden to small business at this point in time in life is not going to be an easy thing for them, whether it's dollars for 10 employees each or whatever. I just think we need to be really cautious about that.
right, we haven't gotten there yet, but we are looking at a very tough budget this year. And
Absolutely.
Bonnie, how much work would it take to just give us a sense of what the revenue would be if we did do a very small increase? I agree with Wilda that this is not a time to be cavalier at all, and my guess is that it's not going to bring in enough money for me personally to feel like it's worth sending the wrong message to our businesses. But I would love to have some quick calculations about what we would expect if we did do a $1 or $2 increase on FTEs.
so we know that there are roughly 15,000, it was 12,000 people a day come to Milwaukee for work, and then 1,000 live and work here. So I guess roughly around 13,000 employees in the city every day.
But that doesn't necessarily equate to FTEs.
That's true. It doesn't. And also,
Gives you a ballpark.
those figures were pre-virus. And I think our best thing, I mean, in whatever way, is to hope that as many businesses as possible come back with at least as many employees as they had before. And I think that's going to take a while for that to happen. So I'm a bit concerned about any and all costs for business, just like I'm concerned about costs for renters and costs for mortgage holders and whatever. It's a lot of things we have to think about at the moment that we haven't necessarily had on our plates before.
It would take us a little bit of time to pull the data, just through the database, but we can probably get you something early next week.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Bonnie.
Any other questions on parking or business registration? The next two boxes on this page mistakenly were included, but you're welcome to review, but there shouldn't be any changes. That's kind of in error, so that shouldn't be on there. So the next section, we've got changes.
I just want to say one more thing. Wilda, I think we're going to get a whole lot more pushback on our continued increase in the parking fees, because that's a steeper increase than a $2 per employee per year charge. Then we're going to get put,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If we're going to worry about that, that's the place to worry.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. And, I don't disagree with that point of view at all. It's there again, it's something that's going to be difficult for businesses coming back, just like any increase in employee, FTE is going to be hard. It's all going to be difficult, but we better figure out what works the best for not only the city, but also all of our constituents out there and how that business climate looks in the both near to far future. Far at this point being like 2 to 3 years out before they probably totally come back. Yeah. So I don't disagree with you, Mark. It's a good point. Definitely a good point.
I mean, that's a bigger increase, right?
Much, yeah. It also doesn't necessarily affect every employee.
Correct. It's more aimed at the downtown, and so it doesn't bring in that much money. And the point of that was social engineering, right? The point of that was to get us to the point where the cost of your monthly TriMet pass was the same as the cost of parking for a month.
Right.
Maybe this isn't the moment for continuing our social engineering and back off of that, but recognizing the fact that we are not going to be bringing in the funds we need in a lot of other areas, so that a little spread further out, spread to all of the businesses, a little increase in the per employee thing. That would be my argument. If we're going to worry about increases, let's worry about the big one that people are going to notice and yell about, and then consider increasing the business per FTE by $1 or $2.
You make good points. I thank you for that. I certainly don't want us to begin to look at it all and say, man, we better not increase anything, because
all our costs
our city has to be able to be maintained. And
yes.
we know what the cost to that is. So yeah, I think they're all things certainly worth talking about and considering, and how it all fits together.
Who pays for those parking passes? Is it largely businesses downtown, or is it the individuals who are getting the passes? And businesses just doing a pass through? You see what I mean?
It's both. Some businesses pay for their employees to have a parking pass. Some businesses just help collect the money from the employees.
Mm-hmm.
Some businesses don't even do that. They just say, if you want a parking pass, go get one.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of this. I mean, it has happened before where, we didn't based on feedback, the automatic wasn't done. And, we're all anticipating, a recession, but we don't really know much reality right now. And so I feel like a lot of this is a little bit of guesswork. And I think, I'm all for, trying to make sure we're not, making anything more difficult for people. But I do want to point out that we are still much, much lower than TriMet.
Well, as of next year, but based on this, will be $20. Isn't a TriMet pass to $100?
It's $100 a month, so we'll still be $20. I mean, that's $20 a month. That's over the course of a year, that's
right.
$200 cheaper than taking TriMet. So.
Mm-hmm. Good points.
We're subsidizing bad behavior. That's just, we're.
Yeah, and I do recall the times too when, things hadn't been increased for years, and so all of a sudden, just like we were talking about a minute ago, it had to be a big bump instead of a little bump, and we don't want to get into that position again.
Right.
For sure. So those are good points, very good points, all.
What if this, Jim, just spitballing here, what if we don't have an increase in the parking fee next year, but do have a $10 increase set for 22. And then we throw a $1 or $2 increase on the per employee on the business fee, business license.
Well, for it to make any difference on the FTE, I think you're going to have to go at least $2, not $1.
Well, so in my rough calculations, $2 would bring us in $26,000-ish.
Right, depending, right. Yeah.
maybe, does the hospital not pay this? I can't remember. Bonnie, do you know off the top of your head if the hospital pays?
The business registration, I don't think that they do. I think they're considered like a nonprofit.
So that's the wild card. However many of those, 13,000 employees the hospital has wouldn't be paying into it. So it's obviously less than.
I think that per FTE, raising it $1 or $2 is going to be pretty immaterial overall. And the real cost that you, or the real revenue that you see is in the standard base fee. Because I think the amount's pretty small. But I can verify that and get back to you guys. But just to clarify though, are you looking to see, do you want to change the parking permit fee and then get back to us with at the council meeting if you agree with increasing what would you like us to do?
Is there anything we were anticipating using that increased revenue on the parking permits for? So are there any consequences if we change that and just don't do an increase would be one of my questions. And I'd like to consider those two issues separately. We sort of conflated them, but I do think they are separate issues that are sort of rooted in the same.
Well, I mean, I just think it's policy and it's related to, our parking management strategy that's sort of under development. And so, I don't think that there's, necessarily any, I mean, this is obviously a question for staff. I mean, I don't think that there are so many parking passes that we're going to have a substantial dip in revenue, but keeping it in line with an ongoing parking management strategy for downtown, I just think, I like the mayor's suggestion about a pause button for this sort of year of unknown, but as a way of making sure we're still tracking it, in year 2, making sure that that's included as a sort of a reminder, on the books, that this is not something that we're losing sight of. It's like I said, I think it's a real policy question. It's not just our parking management, but it's our climate action.
Agreed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well said.
Yeah.
And I would support the pause button, the 1-year pause button. I think that makes a lot of sense given all of the unknowns.
Yeah, and after our discussion, and if we do that too, I mean, I could certainly support the $2 addition on FTE, and then the next year another increase. We've got to keep up with it. I see that.
Okay, well, let's, awaiting your further information, let's consider that kind of where we're headed. Pause on this year's parking fee and a $2 increase on the business, whatever you guys call that.
Business registration employee fee.
That one.
I might be able to actually get you an answer tonight if I can leave it. If you want to move on to the next sections, I can go see if I can get a little research done for you.
Okay. Do we want to check in with Layla or oh God, I'm blanking on his name. Our parking guy. As to whether this would be a really bad idea for some reason.
I think that Layla would concur with Council President Faulkner's statements that this is a policy decision, and it's been one that has been moving us towards the policy goals outlined in your parking strategy. I think she also is the person who's looking through the applications tonight for the business grants, and she has seen the need for those businesses and the desperation in some of their applications. So I think she's going to be just as conflicted as you are. And I don't think that she's going to have a magic bullet here. I do know that out of all of the constituent responses that I've gotten since we started this, there have been the following public comments that have come in over the course of the last month. Individuals contacting us asking if they could have their business registration returned to them. which we have not done, but some people, because they're closing their doors, possibly for short term, possibly long term, that is an issue for them, and they're looking to get any pennies back that they can. I do know that we have had a lot of feedback about parking downtown, primarily from residential residents who aren't used to having to try and park a vehicle during the daytime hours in the downtown core. I haven't heard as much from businesses, but I know they're struggling. We had 2 businesses contact us and ask if they could forgo buying permits at all during this time. What we settled on was that they could buy day use permits, because in some cases, most of the employees weren't coming in for almost any extended amount of time, but if they were going to come in for a day, it was cheaper for them to buy the 1-day passes. So our front desk helped them sort of calculate that out to figure out how they could get them those savings. But yeah, I think everybody's struggling right now. And I think so are we right now. So this is definitely a thing where on our budget, we're trying to make sure that we can make all of our ends meet. But I also know businesses are there with us. There's no perfect answer here.
Mm-hmm. That makes me feel really uneasy about the $2 increase even. If people are asking for their business license registration fees back, that's $140, and it's got to be hard emotionally to go through the process of calling the city and asking for that money. So I do have some reservations there. It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but I know, having run a small nonprofit, when you've got an $80,000 budget, and times are hard. I led that organization through the recession in 2008, and we were counting every penny. And I did layoffs and the whole 9 yards.
What if we push that out also to the next year? What if we push the $2 increase out to 22?
Sure. And I would also be happy to entertain, what if we did and I don't know what the point would be for this, but what if we said, if you've got 20 employees or more, you get the $2 increase. And I know that puts us back into the tiered system. So and we're talking so little money, it really may not be worth it.
Right. So if you only have, 18 employees, it's $36 for a whole year increase. It's not like it's, a ton of money.
But it's also about the message we're sending to our small businesses about what we are prioritizing and how we care about how they're doing. And it's signaling that we want to be partners in helping them get through this, rather than, some of them will see it as us using them to survive. And I don't think that's the message we want to send. So that's what I mean by the cost benefit analysis of, are we going to get enough revenue out of this increase that it is worth the cost of the message it sends to our businesses?
So not do it at all, or not do it until 22?
22 would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Just to clarify, do we want the 2021 rates that I'm presenting right now as the increases for 2022?
So the FTE fee was not changing in 21 at all. So that stays the same. 22, it goes up $2.
Okay.
And then the parking fee, we're dropping that back down to 70 for 21, and then bringing it to 80 in 22. That's
So we're basically skipping a year.
Basically, we're skipping a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great year to do a biennial introduction.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other questions or comments for business registration or parking?
No.
Just to clarify, so the quarterly will be in fiscal year 22. You might have said that, but just to make sure that so the fiscal year 22, the quarterly will also be 230 instead of 260.
Correct.
Wait, what?
Doing the same thing with the quarterly pass.
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry.
the next section with some changes, engineering. And Steve, are you available? I'll pass it to you.
I'm here.
Excellent.
So the first phase of engineering, just the inspections and permits. I did not change anything here. I don't have a real comfortable handle on if they're low or if they're high. So I chose to leave them alone and look at this more intensely. And by the time the next budget cycle comes up, so these are all identical. And then the ones I did change were the SDCs, and similar to Sam, I used the Seattle Construction Cost Index. I used 2.9, Sam. I didn't lower mine to 2.5. I didn't know you were doing that. So I figured it was 2.91. I ran it down to 2.9. So that's all they got from me. Sorry.
What page is that? Sorry.
Or am I jumping ahead on SDCs? Is that a different part?
It is, yeah, it's section.
I'm sorry. I jumped ahead on my SDCs. I apologize. So everything that's right now in engineering, which is under section 5, I did not change any of these fees at all right here.
Okay. Any questions or comments, Council?
Yes, if I can. Yeah, so I'm looking at, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. I'm looking at page SS49, engineering, and it shows a difference in 21 and 22 on flat fees for encroachment permit application. It shows 250 now, but it shows 150 in each of the ensuing years. Is everybody else seeing that same thing?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is that supposed to not be there? Is it supposed to still be 250?
Okay, Keith, the only document I have is the one you had me proofread the other day, so I don't have the SS numbers. You give me a page number that's on.
Hold on, I gotta go back to the top.
So the engineering 5 starts on page 11 for me, and it goes on to page 12 that talks about materials, electronic drawings.
It's SS16.
In the right-of-way permit application section,
Yeah, thank you.
major encroachment permit application.
Right-of-way permit, okay. Major encroachment.
Goes from 250 to 150. In other words, we reduce it by $100 and then hold. Is that on purpose?
On the document I reviewed from you, Keith, I don't have a reduction. I have it all the same.
Okay, then this is probably an error on my part then. I can certainly update it and change it back to 250. My apologies.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask,
Good catch, Rhoda.
yeah, well, I was gonna ask why it was less, but then after your discussion, I went, oh, something's wrong, it's not supposed to be less. So, okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, just an error because the document I'm looking at, Keith, it shows everything exactly identical. I don't see any changes up or down.
Okay, I'll go back and double check and correct that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so we got that. Great, thank you.
And we covered this at the top, but I just have to ask again for my own comfort of mind, because throughout this we see very low permitting costs for tree removals and a lot of tree stuff, and we will have the opportunity to adjust those once we've adopted the tree code and made some policy decisions. Okay, great. Thank you for the nodding heads. I feel better.
Okay.
When are we going to
Peter
get
and I
that?
will have to work on jointly. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. That's something Peter and I will have to work on jointly once we have a better handle on it.
Peter, you got a timeline?
Peter?
I'm muted, I'm sorry. Timeline on the so the tree code right now, on the public piece, Justin has reviewed it. I've brought it back to the tree board for their comments, and we're making some revisions on that public piece of the tree code. And hopefully at our next tree board meeting, we'll go over those and then be ready to bring something to council on that piece for review. And then we were including the private development tree code as part of the comprehensive plan code amendments that we were working with.
They're in that first tranche of, or first set of code with housing and with parking.
Okay.
And they're a part where he's actually contributing to the consultant who's coming in to lead that process. But it has been delayed because the comp plan was delayed.
Okay. All righty.
The next section is FELOC, or fees in lieu of construction. And Steve, I believe that one is you as well.
That is, and I bumped these up by the same 2.9% I used for SDCs. And did not go beyond any more in-depth thinking than that. I know there was an email earlier today on ADUs, and earlier, well, this whole year, since January, I've been talking with Kelly. Well, Kelly and Justin and I and others have been talking about what do we do with ADUs? How do we make them affordable and yet still get some infill? We settled on last month a compromise since the cities seems to have a shortage of both housing and has a shortage of sidewalks. We landed on that if you had an ADU and you do not have a sidewalk or curb in front of your house, you would pay a FELOC for the cost of adding a curb and a sidewalk. And then that FELOC could be used for any sidewalk upgrade in that NDA. So it brought it down quite a bit. So for 100-foot frontage, the maximum at 293 was $29,300. For a sidewalk and curb in front of that same 100-foot frontage is $8,000.
Can you also talk then about how that paired with the SDC discussion and kind of how we balanced that as your current stance?
And I didn't entirely follow what Steve just said, so if you could clarify that too.
Okay, so the maximum FELOC fee for a street that needs major improvements, council settled on $293 per lineal foot last year, which for 100-foot frontage would translate into $29,300 due for improvements. For an ADU, we've been wrestling with this for 3 months now, and we sat through and discussed it and settled on the fact that the city's shortage is sidewalks, while we have the SAFE program, and it is homes. So rather than charge too much money for an ADU and make them priced out of the market, we thought a reasonable compromise would be to charge for curb gutter and sidewalk for the unimproved frontage of the home. And so for that same 100-foot wide lot, the fee for sidewalk and curb and gutter is $8,000. And
so what you remove, Councilor Beatty, is the road. So we were requiring a half-street road improvement. So you're taking out a substantial percentage of the cost by not requiring that improvement.
correct.
60, 70%.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm having built the street improvements. I'm surprised by that because I don't think what I paid for the road was nearly what I paid for the curb and gutter. And
Well, are you counting your amazing stormwater garden thing there?
well, I'm just talking about the engineering costs. I'm not counting that in what I'm thinking about. I'm just talking about what I paid for the pavement that was poured. So I'm surprised to hear that you're saying, 8 out of 29 means less than a third of the cost of the street improvements is curbs and gutter and sidewalk.
It might depend on how bad the street was, right? So your street was probably okay, And so it was just maybe a little bit of widening to get it to the curb that you built, whereas some of these streets, they'd be rebuilding from the center of the street over to the gutter. Right, so I'm trying to think of one of the streets.
Sure, I mean, I could see that, but that still seems like, and I didn't have to do the whole dig out the road thing. That seems odd to me, but I mean, that doesn't seem really the right math to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, to explain some things, the $293 included installation of water line, sanitary, storm manhole, the water quality gardens that you installed, included all of that. Last year when I first started, Kelly had asked me what did I think a street improvement cost fee would be. And I drafted up some numbers based on what I had seen in recent contracts. And I came up with the high 300s, Kelly, and that as a reasonable cost. And this includes design cost and construction management and all the soft cost that goes in running a construction project. It was determined that was too high, and that number got tossed out. We went with 293. The current value of 8,000, that's based on what we've seen in contracts over the last year plus. Tessie actually is tracking all the contract bids that come in. And the $8,000 based on what we are actually as an average of what we're seeing on our construction contracts.
So you're saying $80 a foot to build curb, gutter, sidewalk, and not those other components?
Yes, what we're seeing on recent contract bids is the curb and gutter runs $30 a foot, and the sidewalk is running right around $10 per square foot. So for a 5-foot wide sidewalk, that's 50, and a foot of curb that runs 80. That's how we came upon that number. We're open to adjust it. I say we struggled with it for quite a bit, trying to figure out what is fair for both a homeowner building an ADU and what is fair for residents, citizens needing a safe place to walk to and from school or to and from the store. And that's where we landed, but we're open to suggestions from council if you choose us to go a different direction.
And is that reflected in these charts?
That is not reflected in the chart. And talking to Justin, the way the current state law is written, when a development comes in on an unimproved street, we have to use judgment based on the condition of the street and a lot of factors. One size fits all got thrown out a while ago, and we have to lot by lot determine what we feel is needed to make that a workable street in front of that lot. So for a new home construction, we go for a lot more. For an ADU, we struggle. What is fair?
Angel, you look like you might had something you wanted to say.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to sort of, put this in the context of the conversation that I'm having, with the county about right sizing these types of fees. And so, I think I'd like to spend a little bit more time, and maybe Steve, I'd like to maybe talk to you a little bit about, sort of more in depth about the thought process that you're having for these. I do think that even $8,000 is still for an individual homeowner who's trying to, build an ADU for some aging parents, is still going to be pretty unworkable. So.
I mean, maybe we need a work session on that. I think it sounds pretty reasonable personally, but I think it's it's less than a third of what the cost otherwise would be. So that's a pretty significant But anyway, I mean, I think.
Right. I mean, that's like, I mean, even if, you offer a 60% coupon on, something that costs $100,000, it doesn't make it any more affordable for somebody who's strapped for cash and, trying to, like I said, take care of an aging parent. So I would love to have a way bigger conversation about this and a more comprehensive one.
So I'm supportive of that.
It is definitely a policy question. This is really where we need to be talking about, like, this isn't just about, making ends meet for the city, how we accomplish that. Yes, of course, we know what the entire CIP costs, how we divvy that up among, potential home builders. There's a lot of wiggle room there. There's conversation, we can be talking about, square footage as a proxy. And I think we have not as a group had a policy conversation, about this. And I don't think we have nearly enough time, or data to talk about that right now.
So is there room somewhere in the near future in a study session to do a deep dive on?
We can absolutely, but I think that my ask is that you all come prepared to tell us how much you think is an allowable amount. Because I think staff's been shooting in the dark for a couple of years and they keep trying to get lower. And we're starting to struggle with what we also are trying to cover with the money. I think that the reason staff landed here is because this was about sidewalks, honestly, and that has been the priority of this council, has been to pay for sidewalks. And in order to do the sidewalks, we've needed to do the curb. So that's honestly why we landed here, is we're trying to hit both of your goals. And
this is an interim thing, right? This is an interim thing because we'll be looking at all of that in the code writing.
I think it's an interim thing, but what Steve just said is going to be consistent with where we have to land, which is we have to look at how much pressure each development is going to have on the system to an extent. So that's his responsibility, so we don't go to court when we levy FELOC. And so I just, yes, we can talk about it. To be honest, we've talked about it off and on for 3.5 years, and I don't think we're delivering what you all want. So I guess my struggle is, yes, we can absolutely put this on the agenda, but having Steve spend some time to go back and recalculate things without having very clear direction as to what you want us to charge for is hard.
Can I actually just jump in on one thing? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So I mean, part of this, why you're feeling like this is a disjointed conversation, is in part, my fault, because I came in, we talked, we came up with a proposal about potentially using CET and doing some reductions. And when all of this hit, we're not talking about using CET right now. We, like as Steve mentioned, we pared it back about as far as we thought we could pare it back, which is just have the ADUs cover the sidewalk cost, and continue and have been already implementing this proportional measure with the ADUs that we have in the pipeline to try to facilitate those to the best that we can. In terms of what the bigger policy conversation you want to have, I guess I would just caution and urge the fact that we are about to have major revenue declines in every utility fund across the board. So I think there's going to be a bunch of decisions that we need to make, and I don't know what all of them are going to be. But I think we probably need to get some better information about where some of that's going to land, and what we want to waive and where we want to. I mean, I hear you, and I wish I could tell you that next month or next week or whenever we want to talk again, I would have a better idea. But we're going to be living in a very different world than we were when we started this conversation, in every respect. So I don't think we're going to fill those gaps with ADU construction. I mean, I don't think it's that simple, but I can't give you those kind of trade-offs that I was going to try to maybe tee up for you before. So that's just my only caution on that front.
And I really would, I appreciate that, Kelly. Thank you. if we want to have a special session, I would love to know kind of what you want us to price in preparation for that conversation. One of the things Kelly has been great with me about for the last 4 weeks has been, Anne, would you stop talking about one-off budget issues without talking about the subsequent lots? Because it's always, there's trades. I think she's right. I don't think this is a huge one, but I do just want to be aware that Steve and his team are still trying to deliver the full CIP from their homes. So I just would love some direction as to what scenarios you'd like us to bring back if we want to have this discussion sooner than later.
And the other thing to think about, Angel, that I'm hoping to have this conversation when we get to that point in the comp plan and the zoning and all the maps and everything, is to look at how many more of our streets are small neighborhood streets that aren't pass-through streets, that aren't, can be VUNers. And therefore, their whole lift is a lot smaller than the curb gutter sidewalk, 22-foot street. And I think that's going to make a pretty big difference for a lot of properties. And it also solves, to some degree, maybe, hopefully, people driving like maniacs on neighborhood streets.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen how many streets will really be appropriate for that kind of treatment. There are definitely more. There are definitely some, but I don't know that I think that's a big chunk of the city, frankly.
Well, having reviewed those maps over and over and over and over and over again, I think you might be surprised at how many dead-end, disconnected, whirly streets that go absolutely to nowhere except for the 40 homes that live on that, on that stretch of road. So I think that you might be looking at those safe maps. There's a lot more than I think you think. We are not even close to being a grid city. Initially, I think there were some good intentions there, and then the 60s happened. So.
Yeah. Yep.
And to answer your question, I'm sorry, Councilor Heisey, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think Kelly's caution about it will be a very different world also affects the likelihood that we're going to have the people who are trying to build a place for their parents to live turning to ADUs. I don't know what to expect in this strange new world. And I don't know where the balancing point is between the sacrifices we can make as a city to support the kind of housing we hope to build is. I don't know where that point is, but I have less confidence that ADUs are going to be a significant part of housing families who are trying to age together than I did before.
I don't know, long-term housing at the care facilities or even a partial care is so incredibly expensive. It's like $8,000, $9,000 a month.
I'm not saying that that's the
year's worth of that. You can build an ADU.
I think what you're looking at is people just putting people in you clean out a bedroom and your parents move into it.
Oh, yeah.
I also, in full transparency, think right now we're all doing this a bit. And no, I didn't just lick my finger. Because there's COVID out there. So I don't know. Right now Sam's permits are actually pretty high. She's continuing to see a lot of inspections because a lot of people have things going and they suddenly have some time to get them done, and they want people to come in and approve those so that those projects are out the door. On the other hand, I know that people are losing their jobs, and I've heard of a couple of cases where people have talked about doing stuff like this and just don't have the revenue anymore. They don't personally have the money. With or without our $8,000, they don't have the cash. So I totally respect that this is an important question. I think we're in for it. I mean, staff really has gotten together in multiple meetings, multiple times to try and figure this out. I I think I'd like to have a policy conversation before we ask Steve to do more work on where you want us to land so that we can hear from you and hopefully get a strong sense where the majority is and then come back with some responses from there. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that, you know, as sort of a guide for this conversation, at least that maybe it looks something like the conversation that we're having with the county about SDCs. And that is a tiered approach, you know, based on, Councilor Heisey, did you have something? I wasn't sure if. I think she's frozen. And so I'm happy to recirculate those documents, those presentations to the group, because I think that that's a good framework, I think, to start from, and then maybe look at how we would, if we were in control of that conversation, what would that look like for SDCs and also for FILOC.
And we can do that. I still, I'm going to ask Justin to be in that conversation just because I don't know on FILOC how that has to be applied. And so I think he and Steve are probably the best people to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty similar. It has to be somehow tied to, you know, actual impact and actual cost. And so, you know, tiering it to, well, obviously we'll let Justin answer that question, but I you know, if it doesn't work for this conversation, then we can throw it out the window. But I think.
And just to, I didn't really bring that information, but in terms for ADUs right now, we are waiving water. I believe we're waiving storm, and we're only charging 65% on the transportation. So the place, if you want to give, it would be more transportation. So the total dollar amount in SDCs for the city, let me see if I have that, is 2,278. So just in terms of, I know I will review what you send in terms of more tiering, but for ADUs, we did break that out to charge them less for SDCs.
And I would suggest that for ADUs, which is, you know, sort of down there with, you know, some of the smallest, it should be even less than 65%. And the way you make up for that is, you know, with the large homes, you increase that above the one EDU. So, you know, a large four-bedroom house should cost substantially more than you know, a one-bedroom unit or a studio.
And so you're talking about not just the frontage, but also the SDC. So that's a conversation to have Peter in as well, right?
I think that's, to me, it seems like those things should be related in the same conversation.
So I'm just going to weigh in a little bit on the plumbing. So if we do something with the fixtures, because I know that was something they had talked about, our plumbing permits are over the counter, which means that they issue without us ever seeing them. So it would be very hard to track anything after the fact. Does that make sense? No. So, sorry.
Very cute.
So it would be very hard. And Chuck and I had that discussion at one point because he was trying to do it by fixture count, and he wanted me to somehow track my plumbing fixtures after. And I was like, I don't have the capacity for one thing, and I just don't know how we would do that with them auto issuing. So and they're looking at different ways to do it. Maybe keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that we talk about quite a bit at the county as well, you know, because and there's no suggestion that you do anything about fixtures for that exact reason. It's at the point, the way to look at it is that, you know, an ADU over the course of its life will tend to serve one or two people. A 5-bedroom house over the course of its life will tend to serve 5 people. not, and it doesn't matter how many fixtures or even how many toilets you have in it, you know, if you're setting that at the beginning, you're going to capture, you know, over the course of its life, the impact on the system.
So if they added bathrooms later, though, because I know I've had a couple residentials that have come in and they go from a residential to a senior care facility, which is still considered residential, but they add 4 bathrooms.
Right, but you're changing the use at that point, and so you would get another bite at the apple.
But they're not. They're still residential. It's still considered exactly residential. It's just a remodel, and we have to treat them exactly the same way as we would any other remodel or any other residential.
Are we not able to write that into our code that if you're changing the use, it's a care facility that's...
It's not a change of use. It's the ones where they have the in-house care where there's less than 5 residents. So they have 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, and then they have the in-house care. It's not a change of use. It's still strictly residential.
I think, I mean, I'd want to know from Justin, but I think that may be a state law thing.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, I'm just things we've run into as we've been discussing it, but that would be one of my concerns is if we did it bathrooms or fixtures, the keeping track of it later on and who paid what at what point. Do we grandfather from this point backwards? Anything new? You know, that type of.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at the presentations that I'll go ahead and forward to everyone whose face I see right now, you're going to see that the county is doing exactly those same calculations and considerations, and we're not going to see, you know, a significant portion of our single family homes all of a sudden turn over into long-term or you know, resident care facilities.
True, it's not a big portion.
So as an alternative, if you all just want to waive fees and FELAC for ADUs, I'm fine. We can go, I can find a way to legally do it. Do we want to do that tonight?
No. Waive fees, meaning...
I can waive STCs and I can waive FELAC. I mean...
I thought Justin's opinion before was we have to backfill SDCs.
I do. I don't think we're talking about that many units. And at this point, honestly, we are working really hard to find a solution here for something that I think we can probably, it took me a while to get here, but if this is the direction that council wants to go, then we can do it. We'll figure it out. I really am okay. Mark, what? I can't hear you. You're on mute, Mark.
You just dropped the bomb on us.
You know, here's the thing is I think that we're in a recession. And I think that the likelihood that you're going to have more than 10 of these is slim. And we talked about it and we've gone round and round. And honestly, at this point, like, if this is the thing, then let's just do it, if that's what you want to do. But I think that trying to go through multiple calculations and stuff is going to end up spending more time, and I'm not sure we're going to hit. I mean, basically, we've already taken out, I think, my calculation, $17,000 out of the deal, maybe more. And we're only charging, based on what Kelly and Steve just said, 9 or 10, maybe at the very most. So it sounds like that's still not enough. It's about a third of the price of what we're charging elsewhere. Let's backfill the STCs and do it. If that's like, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I get, you know, when you're talking about backfilling, I'm thinking about, that's what I'm, you know, that's where I'm saying we should look at this on a scale of all of, you know, the SDCs that we charge for every type of unit. And I think we're just assuming that the top tier doesn't go up. And I'm suggesting that, you know, the builders of 4-bedroom homes are going to see an increase to backfill this decrease that we're suggesting on an ADU or tiny home.
I guess, Ann, are you just saying that the time we spend figuring all that out is not it's worth less than the time it's going to take to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the percentages in the reports that the county has run. They're looking at the exact same, housing stock that I mean, their numbers include Milwaukee.
But we're already we've already looked, what Kelly just said is that we're already not charging on water. We're already not charging on sewer. We've dropped transportation down to 65%. I don't think that the 10 units we're going to get is going to drastically increase the rates for others. If the goal is to increase the rate for others and it's less about the ADUs, we can have that discussion as well. I know that when I've talked to Steve about how much we charge on SDCs, he thinks it's crazy that we don't charge more. And in comparison to Wilsonville, we are far less on SDCs than they charge there. And we can have I'm in for all those conversations. I think my question here is, if the goal is to go fast and to get STCs through.
ADUs.
I'm sorry, thank you. So many acronym. Gosh, I can't even speak. Okay, if the goal is just to do this, then I don't want to spend more time having Steve try and find the right balance right now with as busy as everybody is. I'd rather just do it and come back in a year and say, we've done it, and here's how many units we had, and this is how much it ended up costing us in backfills. And then you can decide whether or not you, at that point, based on the economy and the world that we live in, whether or not that is the day that we need to review this.
Okay, then yes, I'm in.
Me too.
Kathy is having a hard time getting on right now. Wilda is in. Lisa?
I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, I do think Angel's bringing up a bigger point about not just ADUs, but all of our, tiering. Tiering is about, duplexes and smaller homes and, everything. It's a bigger discussion. But in terms of ADUs themselves, so I do think, and that's a discussion I think we should be trying to have on our SDCs. I'm in agreement with that. But if you would just want to do a pilot for a year on ADUs and see how it comes out, I'm okay with that.
I think that once the code is done, we will see whether or not people are willing to build the missing middle stuff that we are now allowing or creating an opportunity for them to build within our code. I think that gives us a better sense for how we're charging for these things and all of the pieces that go into it. Today, honestly, I think that where Kathy is right is I think that people are going to feel really broke. And when we go into a recession, people become less likely to expend the money. Let's see if this helps. Let's see what happens this year. We will find a way to backfill it, and we'll go from there.
Can I ask a detail on some minor things?
Please.
We currently have 3 ADUs in the pipeline, 1 wrapping up, 1 midstream, and 1 just getting started. Is the no FELOC fee retroactive for these 3 that are in the pipeline right now?
Yes, they're the reason that we're even here today, is we've been trying to deal with this, and I think we just got our answer from council, unless council wants to disagree with me.
Those 3? I don't know anything about those 3.
We just have 3 ADUs that have been coming through. That's how we got to this new significantly lower rate, was we were trying to find a way to make it fair for them and meet council's goals when we weren't home, basically when we weren't working at City Hall and we were all dealing with other things. So I think it's fair if your goal is to make this easier on them. There were concerns from some of them about how much we were asking. And I think it would mean a lot to them to not pay that.
Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you. Angel, you were a thumbs up? Okay, then yes.
And Kathy just joined us again.
Hi, Kathy. We just completely changed the world.
Well, good.
Sorry you missed it.
I'm glad you made it better.
So we are deciding to waive SDCs for ADUs, full stop, for a year as a pilot to see how we do, backfill those, because it's worth less to the team to keep running through these calculations and trying to figure out the perfect solution than it is to just see what it costs us for a year. Did I do an okay job of?
To clarify, we're waiving FELOC and SECs, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the waiver of FELOC does not require us to do backfill. So really the backfill is only for the SDCs.
And where is the backfill coming from?
Yep.
And so that,
Honestly, y'all, the budget isn't great. And I'm not saying this is the best of choices, but I think that at this point I need more, I'm trying to get Steve more focused on the stuff that we need him focused on right now on that front. And I'd like to see how big this is before I try and do this again.
and are we also agreeing, I got from Counselor Beatty that she agrees we also need to have in the future a more comprehensive conversation about these fees, SDCs and FELOC, and to use the term backfilling, a tiering of the fees.
So I do have a question on that front. So that is an SDC rate study, and we have that in the queue, but right now it's sitting behind the TSP update. And to be frank, we're trying to figure out how to fund fully the TSP update. So would y'all say, I'm still assuming the TSP update is first and the SDC rates are second, or do I have the wrong priority?
No, I agree with that. TSP first.
Okay.
Anybody?
So then it's longer than a year out. I just want to be clear, because right now the reality is the TSP is funded through SDCs. And so that's part of why we're struggling to find the payment for that.
Okay, I mean, I guess the question is, do we need to inform, does the TSP study need to be informed by, or is it, by the rate study, or does the rate study need to be informed by the TSP? And I guess I'm happy either way. The only thing that I would say is that, we're putting significant, we wrote a letter about their initial, Wes's initial proposal on the tiered system that they were doing. We were like, great job. We're super, we're glad you're going down this path. Let's do even better. And we're not even ourselves looking at this approach to our own fees. So
I don't think that's a fair characterization. What I just heard is we will look at it. It is in the queue. We really need a TSP, and that has been made very clear to us on numerous occasions by our residents, and we just know it, even if we didn't hear it from our residents. We need a TSP. We can't do them both at the same time. So I don't think that, I did not hear we are not doing that. I am hearing that we are a small city of 21,000 people who do not have the same resources or the same demands on those resources that Wes has.
I guess I just would say that I would have thought that the SDC tiering is a much slighter lift. A TSP update is a big lift. It took a year plus the last time we did it in 2007, the last time we did it fully.
So to be frank, the issue for me in part is money. Our utilities are the places where we are going to see the hit first, and we're already starting to see it. So when PCC closed, we don't receive water revenue. So we also have a number of families who aren't able to make payments. Some of those are going to go into default. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to handle all those things, on top of which we could be and probably will be bringing back at a future date the need to do much higher SDCs for development, because it's not covering the costs of that development. So I think the question for me, Lisa, is not whether or not this is important or an easier lift. I'm concerned, do we have sufficient revenue to pay for both in this 2-year period? And do we have, or does it need to wait until we have more revenue that comes in for more development within the SDC pot? And I don't have the answer to that today. And if I got that wrong from Steve or Kelly, please correct me.
No, we don't have enough to do. I mean, no, the pot's not big enough, but I guess I would just say, I don't know. It's not to me necessarily about the SDC rate study being easier or harder than the TSP. I guess I was thinking that the urgency was on the TSP because that follows after the comp plan, and then the SDCs are about the system you intend to build, not the one you're maintaining. And so if you don't have an up-to-date TSP, then you're not calculating those rates off of the system that you are going to be building. So it kind of makes sense to do the TSP first. You get the system nailed down, then you do your SDC rate calculation update so that then you're getting the right level of investment in to build out that system. That's sort of the way it goes. It's not about the TSP's easier or harder than the rate study. But yeah, the pot of funds how to pay for it is a real constraint. But we have it on our priority list to get done.
ADUs matter. Don't get me wrong, and I want to get it right. And it matters to me that we make this an affordable and available part of how we improve our housing situation in the city of Milwaukee. We have spent so much time, so much staff time, talking about how to perfect this system, and I still have not seen that it is actually going to be a substantial part of making affordable housing for our residents. And in the current conditions, I see even less likelihood that that's going to occur, because the fact of the matter is people don't have the resources they once had. Some of them still will, yes. But I just don't think that building ADUs is something people are going to be reaching for any more likely, or are going to be likely to be reaching for that in the next 2 years. So I'm really struggling with this. I think that the $8,000 was a really reasonable place to land. I feel like the whole ADU thing is a huge experiment, and it's a wonderful one and a grand one, and I'm so glad we are embarking on it. And I am comfortable with us making mistakes. And if $8,000 is still too much 2 years from now, then yes, let's blow it up. Let's figure out how to get those fees a whole lot lower, if that's the stumbling block.
And I guess my ask is that when we're not just looking at ADUs, we're looking at duplexes and triplexes, and so that at that point you're talking about a different kind of development and a different kind of developer, and I do think that they're at least just what I know from my day job is that the banks are still lending and they are still moving forward with construction. So that's why I guess if a rate study can be done a little bit more holistically, and it's going to wrap up, it's going to wrap ADU into it as well, then I don't know that it's a waste of time or an experiment to it's an actual trying to make sure that we're funding the CIP in an equitable way.
Yeah, and I am all on board with that. A house was built 2 blocks from ours that sold for $650,000. That is horrifying to me. I just got to say, it's horrifying. And that's not the housing I feel we need. Yes, we need housing of all kinds, but that's not the part we all here are trying to address. So I'm on board with that. I still hear staff saying we don't have the money maybe even to do a TSP. So if we are, what are we saying we want to do differently then? Are we saying, fine, we will put the TSP aside and we want to make this happen first? Or, Mark, you might want to turn on your microphone.
I also, while he's getting his mic on, just wanted to add, right now the county's STCs are $10,000. Ours are $2,800.
Yeah, and that's about to change because they're moving forward with the proposal to right size them. That's going to be significantly smaller for a 2-bedroom. They're going to move forward with that tiering process based on 800 square feet or below, and then I think there's 5 tiers. So that's not going to be
that'll affect the West one. That won't affect the NCPRD one. Which
That's
will still
true.
be
That's true.
30,
But the wastewater is, we know that's very significant.
Again,
What I was
whatever you
going
want.
to say to Kathy is that for all the reasons you just detailed about how there's not going to be very many ADUs, that means we're not going to lose very much money in this experiment, which is why Anne threw it on the table, because she's just like, the time it's going to eat up for my staff trying to make it perfect is not worth the very tiny bit of money that we're going to bring in the next year on the ADUs. So it's exactly your argument, only as the reason why she threw it on the table, to just say, let's just waive them for this year and see what happens.
And I missed all of that because my computer went haywire. So thank you.
I would also like to just cap this. If by some reason I am very wrong, I can't probably find money to backfill more than 10. So if we can cap it for now, we can come back to you if it looks like we have more than 10 and have a discussion. But right now we know that we have 3 that are in the pipe.
That would be great. I love
Okay.
that.
There you go. Cap of 10. Everybody good?
Sure. Okay.
All right. When we were on SDCs, the one SDC that didn't go up by 2.9% was the stormwater per square foot. It didn't go up by any. Is it just because 2.9% would be, 30 cents?
Mayor Gamba, I think I need to double check, but that may be an error on my part. I just didn't catch the 21 and 22 rate increases. But I can't confirm right off the top of my head. I'd have to take a look.
On the FILOC, Steve, I'm sorry. I said SDCs, but it was FILOC.
Oh, yes.
So FILOC, the last line is the stormwater management per square foot, newer changed, and that doesn't increase at all. I just want to make sure that that was intentional.
Intentional because 3%. It's a round up, round down figure to the nearest dollar. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There you go. But that means it will never change.
If I keep going with 3%, well, eventually, hidden behind this number are pennies, and so it probably went from 12.70 to 13.30 or so. So if the next 3% goes to 13.55, it'll go to 14. But
okay.
Now we're choosing.
All right. I didn't know that there was a.
Well, yeah. The sheet that I did, that I gave the numbers to Keith on, took it to pennies, and then it got rounded up or down. So.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
Rick, Keith?
Can somebody give me an SS number real quick?
I'm on SS 50 is what I was looking at. Okay. Since we wandered down a rabbit trail there, you want to bring us back, Keith?
Yeah, I think we are done with section 7. Section 7 is library, and we didn't have any changes year over year, but we obviously did add fees for 21 and 22. They're the same as 20. I don't know if anybody has any questions on library.
I had a question about I didn't remember this from past lists. Obviously, I missed it before, but what is the non-district citizen library use that we charge $95 for?
That is for, am I coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. That is for people from out of state or not in the district. Is not from Washington County, from Multnomah County, or the one in Vancouver. So it would be if someone were further from there, and we don't get many of those. I don't think we've had one since I've been here, and that's 8 years.
Okay.
So it's for the off chance that someone from Eugene has 2 homes and they wanted to have a library card with us. But now that we have the passport, people don't need that anymore. The passport allows them to be able to check out based on their library card in another area. So we haven't issued that in a really long time.
Okay.
There is just one slight change I wanted to point out. The Library of Things, before we had a $5 per day fee, and now we're going to have a range of $1 to $5. This is not passed yet at the district level, but I wanted to put that in there because sometimes people are checking out a puzzle. And it just doesn't make sense to charge them $5 a day for a puzzle, as opposed to charging $5 a day for a sewing machine. So that's why there's a range now and not just one flat rate. And we hope to be able to get that passed through the directors with the new coming up in, for the new budget year. So that's why I put that in there. But everything else is the same.
Okay, next section, 8, miscellaneous. You'll see the only change relates to the filming permit. This one, it's kind of based on what happened with Netflix this year. There was quite a bit of staff time spent, either through planning, scheduling, coordinating. Kelly, you can speak more to this too. But we incurred a significant amount of staff time with the Netflix just because we were so much more involved due to the building. And rather than it just be out on the street or in a parking lot or just a minor scene, this was a full day production, required obviously planning at the beginning and end. So from our perspective, I estimated that the city did about 30 hours worth of work. And again, that's a bare minimum. And so the $1,200 fee really didn't justify 30 hours worth of staff time. So I entered as up to 2,400, simply because that kind of gives us a range, if you will. Obviously, on a Netflix type scenario, we would want to charge as much as we could, but those scenarios aren't going to be all of them, and more likely than not, that's probably a one-off scenario. But you can kind of see in the description that, it's pretty loose in terms of the fees varying based on the budget and time to review. Just with the Netflix filming, we incurred quite a bit of cost. So I thought it pertinent to raise that fee, but not leave it just a flat 2,400. It would allow us to make some judgment in terms of, okay, if it's only going to take 5 hours staff time, 2,400 obviously isn't.
I was looking something else up and I've lost my place. What page are we on? I'm sorry.
SS 51.
Thank you.
So more than welcome to comments on the permit or the increase.
No, it's good. No comments.
I would do a little bit of research on what locations in the Portland metro region are getting. Having been in that industry, that's a pretty low location fee, depending on the length of time and all of the stuff involved. If for whatever, we have a beautiful new library now, it is distinctly possible we could end up with even more interest. So, and it might be a good way to bring funds in. So if we have, particularly if we're going to go with some kind of a range, that we base it on their production budget, or we base it on, I don't know what. I would just do a little more research. And there is Oregon has a film. What's it called?
Film. It's called Oregon Film.
Is it? Yeah. So there's some resource out there that should be pretty easily accessed. But I think a range is a great idea. I think we should maybe figure out what that range. The top end might want to even be higher than that.
This is Kelly. I want to say thanks, Keith, for remembering that we needed to raise this fee, because that was not fun. So yes, I'm really glad that you're raising it. Yeah, I think and I don't have it in front of me, but Mayor, we can give you a table or something. I feel like Lake Oswego charges 10. Is it 10,000 or 25,000?
I think it's 10.
I think it was 10,000. We were definitely the cheapest option in Clackamas County. And I didn't do any comparisons against Portland. So I don't know that we kind of like the exposure. So we weren't trying to be the top or scare people off necessarily. So I think we settled on something that at least recovered our cost. But if we could see how high other folks go. But I think Lake Oswego was the highest in Clackamas County, and they were 10.
Yeah, they're trying to scare people off.
Yeah, and so we aren't trying to scare people off necessarily.
Right.
So so I think 2,500 is a great first step for us. But if you want us to look at some other cities' costs, we could do that.
I just think we could have something that's even more nuanced with a little higher end for serious productions that come in. I mean, we could get, like you said, some Netflix show that comes in, they need to film for a week. And they could be willing to pay $5,000 a day for that, or $10,000. We could actually bring in funds that would benefit the city.
And if I recall, Keith, we charged them additionally. So there was the permit fee, and then we did charge them additional costs for additional cleaning, like some things that we had to do, some additional staff time. So we did. It wasn't just the permit fee.
Well, I have to suggest, this is an up to amount, so we can definitely make an adjustment and come back to you all later with the different amount, but it's an up to amount. So there's some room here, so we can, if it's a small production company and it's only going to take an hour's worth of time, we can charge them for that versus an all day production. So this is really just to recover our costs in a lot of ways.
Mayor, are you comfortable if we brought something, or is everybody, I guess, in agreement that if we came back with a higher rate, less than Lake Oswego, that we still think encourages people to participate in something interesting in our downtown core, that we should just base that on kind of the average, or maybe a little better than the average in the region, and then we'll bring that to you for the fee schedule adoption?
Sure.
Yeah, and I really like the up to. I think that's really respectful of the differences in productions. That if as we've seen in Milwaukee, there's absolutely no impact. Everything's happening in a warehouse. Then there shouldn't be nearly the same size of a fee associated with that as with using our city hall for a day.
Yeah, and maybe what it means is we need a different. Another line item there that talks about actual location fees. So we have a filming permit, and then location fee or location rental for city-owned properties, which is completely different.
Yeah, I also like the up to, but I think the up to should be a lot higher. 25 is really minimal, I think. And if you're looking at comparisons, it seems to me, if I'm remembering correctly, that Clackamas County Tourism or Clackamas County Economic Development, one of the two, also has a film section. And so they have some, maybe ideas, documents, prices, whatever that we could look at.
If you're okay, what I'd like to do is do the up to, based on everything that's been said here, make it a little higher based on what the averages are. Mayor, the interesting thing with the locations is that the locations in and of themselves are weird. So, for instance, one of the things we ran into is when we were going to deconstruct, which is a nice way of saying tear down, the library. We had them, there was a group that wanted to come in and show it going kaboom, basically. So there are some things we're never even going to be able, they may be inside, they may be outside. There's a lot of variables. If you're okay, I'd like to just leave it to staff to determine what the impact is and to make sure that they base the pricing on both the ability for the individual to pay and on the demands on the facility. Is that okay? Okay.
Who's talking?
You need to unmute Keith.
Keith is talking.
Sorry, y'all. My first time. We're halfway through. I figured I would have done that 3 times. So there are no changes for municipal court. All fines have stayed the same. So with planning, I don't have anything on the slides that we're looking at. I actually forgot a small change that Denny had given to me. But Denny, are you on the line still? Would you like to explain it?
Yeah, I guess I am on the line. It's kind of a minor change. It's on page, I think, 26 of the proposal, but page 28 of your staff report. And it's related to the pre-application fees. We've split the proposed pre-application fee into 2 different categories, so that the larger fees, the larger applications, the more complicated applications would be $600, and everything else would continue to be $200, which is what we charge today. So again, kind of a minor thing, but for some of our larger applications, we spend a lot of time with an applicant before things get resolved. So we just thought it made sense to boost that fee up. And it's in line with a number of the other communities in the region. We checked costs for Troutdale, Happy Valley, Westland, Sandy, Oregon City, Lake Oswego. It's in that ballpark. Maybe even a little lower, actually.
If we can make sure that it's a little lower, I mean, I think that would go in line with our housing production strategy. That's one of the things that's called out, that we foster an environment.
Sure. Is it possible for me to share a screen? I could Zoom bomb you guys here.
Hey, Scott, we have a question for you.
If I can find the right file now. I had the right file a little while ago.
Is it possible for Denny to screen share?
Can you ask for it, Denny?
I'm sorry?
So, sorry to interrupt. We have about 20 minutes, unfortunately, until we go into the Planning Commission meeting set up for tonight. So I do want to make sure that we can get through this. Angel, is it okay if Denny sends you what those differences are via email to the council? And then we'll just make sure that we somehow include those into the packet. Is that okay?
That's good with me.
Okay.
I can do that. You guys can move on then.
Thanks, Denny. The next section in police, it's not labeled very well, but if you go to SS 52, there's just no header on it, but this is in the police section. And the one change they did make was the fee for their vehicle impound. It's been $150 for a while. Luke and Shannon felt it should be raised to $160. I don't have an idea on the volume of cars or the revenue that this particular fee generates. And I don't have any substantiation for the $10 increase, other than it hadn't changed in years past.
So it makes sense that that would change, and it's very minimal. But I do have a question about that particular page. So I figured it was police because of what was on there, but I'm not at all sure what residential and commercial at $150 each or whatever, what that refers to.
Yeah, that's just it's part of the other page within, and I can tell you the page number in the packet.
It's SS 28 that's those alarm fees.
Yeah.
We met about.
Oh, okay. I thought it might be because the one right below that says just false alarm.
Yeah, it's just how I grabbed that screen. So
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was trying to figure out, does that mean that's how much it's going to cost me for my permit or, whatever?
No.
All right. Thank you.
Section 11. Sorry, that was police. Section 12. Steve, you want to talk about SDCs and construction excise tax?
Okay, I kind of jumped the gun an hour ago on this and talked prematurely. So, again, I use the sale cost index 5-year average, 2.9% increase, and I apply the flat 2.9% to both 21 fee and to the 22 fee. That's it in a nutshell.
Okay.
Any question?
I'm good. Anybody else?
Yeah, there's 3 pages there of just increases. So no questions. I can move on.
Yeah, and the ones that did not increase, my other ones, looking further down, say the school construction excise tax. I contacted North Clackamas School District. I got those figures from them. The Metro construction excise tax is so little right now. What Metro says, they don't envision anything changing on that. So I did reach out and touch with other people who control some of the fees that we charge. All right.
All right, next section, utilities. Peter, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Keith. Hey, so this is following up from our CUAB budget committee meeting that we had in February. So we're looking at our water utility. We're keeping it flat for this year, a 0% increase with a 2.5% increase in FY22. The wastewater, we're showing 2.5 and 2.5 for both years. On our stormwater utility, we're showing a 2.5 and 2.5% increase for both of those years. And on the SAFE and SSMP, we use the 3-year construction cost index from Seattle average, and we're projecting a 3.58%, I think is what it is, percent increase for those 2 fees. So that was based off of those recommendations were based off of our water and wastewater rate study that we had done last year. And then the other master plans that we'd used as well for our stormwater master plan. The one thing that I did want to point out on our water utility, and Ann mentioned it earlier, and I think Kelly has as well, we're making some revisions to our revenue projections for our water utility and wastewater utilities based on some of the anecdotal evidence that we're seeing on how people are struggling to pay some bills in some respects, and some of the shutdowns on some of the industries. So I think right now we are planning to show about a 10% reduction in water usage, and that corresponds to about a $450,000 to $500,000 loss in revenue off of usage. So that means in terms of water sales for our water utility, we had projected to generate about $4.5 million this year. So, we're looking at right about $4 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And with our general operating expenses, we have about $3.2 million in general operating expenses plus the CIP. So that gives us about an $800,000 range to contribute to CIP projects on the water side, in addition to the cash balances that we've built over the time to pay for some of those projects. But with that loss in revenue, we're looking at some of the capital to defer. I think primarily we're looking at one of the larger projects, our Stanley Reservoir project, which was about a $2.8 million project, to defer that project to free up some additional revenue for our needs that we might have in the future. And then on the wastewater side, I think we were looking at deferring the Waverly project to the next budget cycle as well. On our wastewater side, we generate about $8.3 million in revenues, and a 10% decrease. It's a little trickier there because we bill off of during the summer months, we bill off the winter average. So customers are still going to see that winter average billing on the residential side. And even if their water usage is less than the winter, they still might see that winter average. So we might not see a decrease in wastewater until maybe the fall, with the exception of our commercial and industrial customers. A big part of our revenue or expense on the wastewater side is our treatment cost to Clackamas County. That's roughly about $5 million a year. And if you recall, they have projected about 5% increases in their treatment costs, and we had factored those into our rate study. So that's where we are on those utilities. Any questions on those?
And we'll be getting more into the reductions and the budget outcomes, of course, starting at the budget meetings in May. So Bonnie's been working on those. But I do appreciate Peter highlighting kind of what our thought is around the CIP for those two funds right now.
The only other two updates I had are SS62 and SS63. Forgive me, that should say right-of-way, section 15, not code violations, section 15. So right-of-way should be section 14. So the two changes for 21 and 22 are tied to a 3% increase each year, and that's tied to the law, excuse me. So those increases are standard. Next change is actually in section 15 under code violations. The only change relates to that top line, the general penalty. Tim Salyers decided to raise it from 2 to 500, just to give a little bit more flexibility to the areas where some of the offenses are a little bit more worthy of a $200 fine. So that's all I had in major changes. Again, there's quite a bit of change to presentation and structure, but overall, those are the most significant fee changes or increases for the 21-22 biennium.
Going backwards a little bit to the business registration, we did pull up some numbers. The increase of about if we go from $10 to $12 is about $21,000 increase.
So we only have $21,000 increase. So we only have 10,000 employees, basically 10,500
that don't work for the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot more, and this actually does not include the rentals. So there is some additional to that, but the majority is it's about 10,478.
Hospitals are probably schools either, huh?
Right, hospitals, schools,
churches.
Yeah.
And it would include PCC, which who knows how many people will come back to work there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits of waiting for the first year is we can get a better sense for where we're going to land on employment numbers.
Yeah. Thanks for that one.
All right. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I did confirm that Denny has sent you his list. So if you have any questions, please just write directly to him, and then we'll make sure we discuss it on air at your next meeting. Okay?
Okay.
I think the formatting looks great, by the way. I mean, I had a little trouble reading the second attachment, the changes, but the first attachment I think looks great.
Yeah. You're here.
Yeah.
All Keith, you did a good job.
He's pretty awesome.
Once in a while.
Okay, I actually, if you're okay, I'd like to end the meeting so we can start our planning meeting.
Yeah. All right. Great job, everybody. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.